It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So the Bull Gang is behind me, still working, as they pulled up the parquet, which, if you don't know how this works, there's the ice, there's a layer of this wood that they put down, and there's the parquet floor. So the Celtics are always playing on top of the ice when they're out there. So the Bull Gang packs up that floor. I'm pretty sure that they can put that thing into deep storage now, because it's hard to believe that the Brooklyn Nets are going to go back to Brooklyn and want to come back to Boston. Like, they're just going to say, let's just finish this up, get ready for Milwaukee, and that's it. And if that's how it goes, then I can say that I feel better about this team now, having seen them go through this series, because the stuff that I was looking for coming in, and I understand that this is not where fans wanted them to be, but where I wanted them to what I wanted them to show, having gone through this whole season, having experienced what they experienced, and knowing how disappointing this season was and how it was a lost season. Coming into this series, what did I say? If you've listened to this podcast before, I said, I want to see some fight. I want to see some pride. I want to see them show us that this season, the circumstances of this season were so crushing, so overwhelming, that they couldn't come through. And I think you've seen, like, Michael Malone, Denver Nuggets head coach, talked about the bubble hangover. And that was it was on ESPN. It was on the Hoop Collective podcast. They talked about this. And you look at Denver and Miami and the Lakers and the Celtics, and those four teams, look at how they've struggled. The Lakers looked great to start because they had LeBron, and then all of a sudden the injuries hit and they faded, and they lost to the Phoenix Suns. Now that series is still going on, obviously, but with Anthony Davis getting hurt again, if the Lakers lose in the first round, Miami got swept, the Celtics will be a gentleman's sweep. Denver is trying to fight and hold on. Who knows how they're going to go, but they're hurt. They've lost. I mean, they're starting Facundo Campazzo and Rivers. Like, those four teams are. It's not a shock. It's really not a shock, and it shows that the circumstances of this season were really tough. And I know we've spent a lot of time, and I've spent a lot of time talking about this stuff, and people say, no excuses. But you know what? I think we're starting to see that, yeah, there are reasons for what happened. All of the COVID, all of the injuries, all of that stuff. It's not a surprise that these teams that played that deep into the bubble were impacted. It's not a surprise. And so watching this team out here in this game, they didn't quit. The fans didn't quit. This was a good crowd. This wasn't a crowd that came in with any sort of anticipation. I think everybody in this crowd, for the most part, minus a select few, were understanding of what was happening. They knew that they were coming in here, to root this team on and cheer for this team and try to make this a great environment and hopefully come away with a win. But I think they also knew that this was almost like, we're here to say goodbye. And they hung around with this team. The Celtics got down big in the second quarter. They got down bigger in the third quarter. The crowd got silent, but it didn't turn on the Celtics. They never turned on the Celtics. And that was important, I think. That was an important element to this game, because it's not like the Celtics quit. I think they saw this team out there fighting and trying and looking at the floor and going like, well, if you're going to play Jabari Parker and Grant Williams next to each other, or Shemi Ojeleye, like, if this is all we've got, then how can we be upset? And the Celtics came out and they fought. No matter how down it looked, they kept on fighting. They kept on clawing and scratching. And I really do feel that coming out of this series, I feel like it's a shame that they didn't have Jaylen Brown. It's a shame that Kemba's knee fell apart again, and he got that bone bruise. I'll talk about that more tomorrow, because that needs an entire conversation. I don't want to just gloss over it. I'm going to talk about that because that's a whole different conversation. But it's a shame that they didn't have Robert Williams. And maybe they wouldn't have beaten the Brooklyn Nets if they weren't full strength. But also, if they had all of this and these guys were healthy from the beginning and there was no COVID and we didn't lose Robert Williams and Jayson Tatum and Romeo Langford as soon as he was coming back from his wrist surgery, and Tristan Thompson, and I forget who else had it at this point, Evan Fournier. If the Celtics had just had a normal season with these guys being healthy, they wouldn't have played the Brooklyn Nets in the first round. I don't think they would have been the 7th seed. I think they would have been higher. They probably would have been that 4th seed that we expected them to be. I really do think that. Having seen the fight and how Tatum can play and how these guys are really turning it on as best they can, I think that there's that fight that they've shown in this series, the fight that they showed in this game. Like, I think that was real. And Brad Stevens and Marcus Smart, like, Marcus Smart's the first guy to be like, we didn't put in the right effort. And after the game, he was like, hey, look, I'm proud of these guys. We fought hard. If Marcus Smart is sitting there saying I'm proud of this effort, then I think there's something to that. It doesn't mean that we excuse away this season, because there are serious questions, and there's a whole offseason that I'm going to be podcasting about that looks at the serious questions that were raised from this season. There's no doubt about that. Everybody has some blame in this, okay? But there's also a lot here that was unavoidable, and I think had that been avoidable, and if the Celtics had some sense of normalcy and they weren't one of those bubble teams that all of them seem to be affected, I think it would have been a different season. And all I was looking for was what I thought to be some proof of that, and I think we're getting some proof of that